as we are here to have a short little devotional time together that you all are able to use at your home. I'll be honest with you, this is kind of a awkward experience for me because one, I'm technologically challenged, and then two, it's weird talking to a screen. I'm used to being in a class setting where you can get some feedback, you can get thoughts from other people, and talking to a screen doesn't have the same kind of feel, but we're going to make it work in light of the fact that this is what we have for the moment as we're not able to meet together. And so I thought as we have this short time together, we would spend some time thinking about the subject matter we've been talking about in our class on Sunday morning. And the title for our class has been Reaching Out. And we've been attempting to figure out, how do we connect with our community? How do we reach out to those that are not already part of National Park Church? And how do we share the love of Christ with that community? And I came across a quote by C.S. Lewis that was really interesting to me, and I think can help frame how we think about sharing the story of Jesus Christ with others. I also think that it's going to help us ask some introspective questions of ourselves and maybe connect with Christ more deeply. But C.S. Lewis was once asked, why did you write these children's stories? What made you desire to write stories for kids when you're an Oxford professor? He worked in Oxford University in England. He is a world-renowned professor of English. He was well-researched, well-read. He would sit in the environment of other academics and he could hold his own. And the question is, why would he, this brilliant man, use his skills to write children's books, the Chronicles of Narnia? And this is what he said. He said, I thought I saw how stories of this kind, talking about fairy tales, could steal past a certain inhibition which had paralyzed much of my own religion in childhood. Why did one find it so hard to feel as one was told one ought to feel about God or about the sufferings of Christ? I thought the chief reason was that one was told one ought to. An obligation to feel can freeze the feelings. And reverence itself did harm. The whole subject was associated with lower voices, almost as if something medical. But supposing that by casting all these things into an imaginary world, stripping them of their stained glass Sunday school associations, one could make them for the first time appear in their real potency. Could one not thus steal past those watchful dragons? I thought one could. I really appreciate this from C.S. Lewis because I remember as a kid, week in and week out, showing up on Sunday morning and having a communion talk, and almost all of the communion talks would be, you need to sit here and meditate and remember what Christ suffered. You should feel a certain way about this. And I'll be honest, I would sit there in my seat and I'd be distracted thinking about, what am I going to have for lunch? Or what did that person say next to me? Or what other many kinds of things that were going on in my mind. But it was really hard for me to conjure up the right feelings about Jesus in that moment. And I think for many of us, we have that experience on a regular basis, where we're told that you're supposed to love God more than anything else. You're supposed to be in all of the sacrifice he gave for you. But for many of us, it feels like a rote story. I also think in evangelism, a lot of times, we tell people constantly they ought to feel this way. They have to feel the weight of their sin. They should feel guilty. They should feel that Christ's love is better than any other love. But if Lewis is right, I think that's probably not the best methodology for your own heart or for when you're trying to reach somebody else. Think about the way Jesus evangelized it, the way Jesus witnessed, the way Jesus tried to draw us to himself. What did he do? Something similar to what Lewis says. Lewis does it in his imaginary world, the Chronicles of Narnia. What Jesus does is he tells parables. And what's amazing is in those parables, Jesus doesn't ever go and tell you, this is how you're supposed to feel about it. Because the parable would be a pretty bad parable if Jesus has to then come and Not tell you the meaning, but tell you how you should feel about what the parable was trying to get across. For example, when the prodigal son story is told, we shouldn't be told, you should be really sad and concerned for the younger son when he's wanting to eat what the pigs have to eat. Or we shouldn't have to be told when the son comes home and his father runs out to meet him and gives him a hug and kisses him, hey, you're supposed to enjoy that moment. You're supposed to see the beauty of that moment. No, the story itself captures your emotions and imaginations and your feelings. The story wouldn't be the same kind of story if Jesus had to add, here's what you feel at this part of the story. This is how you should feel at this other part of the story. No, the story itself captures your emotions, captures your feelings, captures your imagination. I think it's like a good novel or a good movie. A good novel or a movie doesn't tell you you're supposed to cry at this point. It doesn't tell you you're supposed to laugh at this point. It doesn't tell you what emotions you're supposed to have or what feelings you're supposed to have. It conjures them up for you by the story itself. And I think for many of us, we have had a long time since we've heard the Christian story, and it conjured up the kinds of feelings we're told constantly you ought to have. When was the last time you heard a story from the Gospels, or you heard about Jesus dying on the cross, and you weren't told you needed to feel something, but you just deeply felt something? It was like in your bones you could feel the reality and the weight and the beauty of a God who loved you so much. I think likewise, if we spend our time telling our neighbors and our friends they should feel a certain way, we're probably going to have a hard time reaching them. But if we show them through our actions and through the story of Jesus, this incredible story of a God who infinitely loves them, the story itself should create that in them. We shouldn't have to tell people this is how you ought to feel. The story itself should conjure up feelings of delight, feelings of awe, feelings of incredible joy and gratitude in light of the mercy of God. And so one thing, as you have a lot of time, maybe more time than you usually have being at home, maybe something you could do as an exercise is write down the last time you were moved by the story of Christianity or any story in relationship to Christianity. And answer the question, why do I think I was moved in that way? Or what is it? What is the aspect of the Christian story that always gets me? It doesn't matter when I hear it or how I hear it. When this portion of the Christian story is told, my heartstrings are tugged. And I think if you write that down and think about that, it can be a really helpful thing, because probably the thing that you connect most to in the Christian story, the thing that you don't have to be told you need to feel a certain way about it. You just do feel the beauty and the wonder and the majesty of that aspect of the Christian story is probably the thing that you're going to be able to share with your neighbor most effectively. Also, a suggestion, during this time that you may have some time at home that you don't normally have, I encourage you to read through the Gospels. And read through the Gospels not with, I'm having to do this because this is a requirement that I have to get done, but reading through the Gospels, praying to God, show me the wonder of the story. Read it like you would read any other novel. And if you're not a reader, read the Gospels in a way that you would start a Netflix series. You don't start a Netflix series and say, oh man, I better have this feeling at this scene. No, you just let the series draw you in and capture your imagination. And I encourage you to do the same. If you're reading the Gospels and your emotion and your feeling is confusion, sit with that confusion. If it is excitement, sit with the excitement. If it's laughter, laugh. If it's joy, experience joy. If it's sadness, experience sadness. If it's invigorating, be invigorated. I encourage you just to let the Gospels speak to you in the way that captures your imagination instead of feeling the pressure and the guilt of trying to feel something. Because I think, as Lewis said, when we try to feel something, the feelings themselves are frozen. They freeze up. But when we allow God in his infinite beauty show how good he is through just the power of his own story, I think our wonder can be captured. So I hope you take some time to reflect on the beauty of God's story, not with the pressure of you ought to feel something, But I think as you study and you read, you will be captured by the beauty of the story of God. And in light of that, be the kind of person that's able to share that, not feeling the pressure to tell your neighbor, you have to feel this, you should feel this, make yourself feel this, but showing them a story that is more beautiful than any other story and see what God can do with that. Look forward to seeing you all soon.